Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
In today's top stories, November 29 marks the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people when the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Partition Resolution 181 in 1947. In a message on the occasion, President Abdelmajid Tebboune has reiterated Algeria's constant commitment to supporting the legitimate struggle of the Palestinian people to recover their non-negotiable right. Algeria is hosting an international conference to bring the leaders of the Israeli occupation to justice and impose sanctions on it for its violations of international humanitarian law. And the Israeli occupation has once again violated the humanitarian truce by firing missiles on the Gaza Strip as the exchange of prisoners and hostages is continuing amidst a catastrophic humanitarian situation. Hello and welcome on Radio Algeria International. I'm Jamal Smani.
Hi, I'm Mariam Bershi.
November 29 marks the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people when the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Partition Resolution 181 in 1947. The Partition Resolution 181 provided for the establishment of a Jewish state and an Arab state with Jerusalem as a corpus separatum under a special international regime.
In a message on the occasion of the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, celebrated each year on the 29th November, the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, has said that the celebration of this day is taking place in a particular and painful condition marked by the Israeli aggression against the Gaza Strip and the occupied territories. The details in this report by Sahed Boughazi.
In his message, President Tebboune reiterated Algeria's constant commitment to supporting the legitimate struggle of the Palestinian people and their just cause to recover all their inalienable and non-negotiable rights, foremost among which is their right to the establishment of an independent Palestinian state on the borders of 4th June 1967 with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital, in line with UN resolutions and relevant international references. The President of the Republic recalled the heavy sacrifices of the Palestinian people and their prolonged suffering from the plots and trials that have targeted their land, their unity and their holy places, paying tribute to this resilient people in spite of all the odious violations with which they are confronted and the desperate attempts to liquidate their cause and to abort the foundations on which any solution could rest that would put an end to the occupation and to the tragedy of the Palestinian brothers. This day of solidarity comes at a time when the Palestinian people in all the regions of their land, and particularly in the Gaza Strip, are facing a horrific criminal aggression aimed at eliminating them ethnically, he added, asserting that the Zionist occupation, which has failed to extinguish the flame of struggle in the heart of this resistant people, is trying this time by committing odious crimes of the rank of crimes against humanity, apartheid, and crimes of extermination to eliminate them existentially. In this respect, President Tebboune stressed the need to step up our efforts to work to ensure that the principles and objectives of the United Nations Charter prevail to provide the necessary protection for the Palestinian people, to put an end to the historic injustice of which they are victims, and to mobilize immediately to save the peace process, which is experiencing an unprecedented stalemate. He considered that this will only be possible if the occupation is forced to comply with the resolutions of international legality, to commit itself to respecting the rules of international law, and to make progress in strengthening the legal and diplomatic gains of the Palestinian people, notably by stepping up efforts to enable Palestine to obtain full UN membership. The President of the Republic reiterated Algeria's categorical rejection of all attempts to erase this just cause, whether by imposing the policy of fait accompli, through which the occupation is trying to undermine the identity of the Islamic and Christian holy places in the occupied territories, or to change their demographic composition through its colonization policies or attempts to circumvent the truths of history and legality. Algeria, which paid a high price to recover its sovereignty and independence, and whose land witnessed the proclamation of the Palestinian state 35 years ago, will remain faithful to its commitment to support the causes of liberation and will spare no effort to support the resistance of the Palestinian people until it fully recovers all its rights, concluded President Tebboune.
The participants in a legal conference on the situation in occupied Palestine and the legal means and mechanisms to bring the leaders of the Zionist entity to justice have called for the creation of an independent international legal system to hold the occupation accountable and impose sanctions on it for its violations of international humanitarian law, underlining the imperative to speed up the reform of the UN Secretary Council to guarantee the durability of international multilateralism. Jordanian lawyer, member of the group of lawyers suing the occupying Israeli authorities before ICC, Mohammed Tawarni, shared with us the details about the different workshops held today.
We have 3 workshops. The first workshop, it's about how we prepare the evidence, the strong evidence, to send it to the International Criminal Court. And also there's another expert, not only from Arab world, from Europe. They came to our meeting to help us about what happened in the past, about how can we make the evidence, especially what happened against the civilian, the woman, the journalist, the hospital, and because this accident is a strong evidence to, if you want to make a file to send it or as a client to the International Criminal Court.
This was Jordanian lawyer Mohammed Tawarni on the meetings held here in Algeria regarding the group of lawyers suing the occupying Israeli authorities before ICC for Radio Algeria International. Back to you, Jamal.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has issued a statement on the occasion of the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, stressing that the dangerous escalation in the region is mainly caused by the absence of disregard for rights. The president added that the Gaza Strip is under an existential threat and deliberate and systematic targeting of civilians. He called for an end to the silent annexation, settlement and racial discrimination measures in the entire occupied Palestinian territory, noting that what is required is to provide urgent international protection for Palestinian people and achieve just, through, and accountability and responsibility. The Palestinian president stressed the necessity of taking strategic steps to address the strategic threat to the two-state solution. He added that the PLO rejected the liquidation projects for the Palestinian issue and the fragmented solutions and maintained the independent and national decision-making and absolute sovereignty of Palestinian people over the land. President Mahmoud Abbas added that it is time to hold an international peace conference, impose international will, and recognize the right of Palestinian people to exist, noting that Israeli aggression puts us at a crossroads. Either the international will prevails or the occupation's will to perpetrate its colonialism. Now, 30 Palestinian prisoners were released on Tuesday evening by the Israeli occupying forces, including 15 women and 15 children from Offer military prison in the town of Baytunia, west of Ramallah, and from Al Masqoubiya prison, a detention center in occupied Al-Quds, said the Palestinian news agency Wafa. A bus and vehicles belonging to the International Committee of the Red Cross transported a number of detainees released from the Offer military prison in Ramallah, while detainees from Al-Quds were released from Al Masqoubiya. Hundreds of people welcomed the release detainees in the city of Ramallah, and many called for the release of all Palestinian prisoners held in the various prisoners of the Zionist entity. The youngest detainee in the prisons of the Zionist occupiers, Ahmed al-Salamiya, 14, declared after his release on Tuesday evening from Damu prison that the Palestinian detainees were subjected to brutality and beaten by the Israeli prison guards.
The Palestinian Journalists Union has said that the Zionist entity is still holding in its prisons 29 Palestinian journalists arrested after October 7th, the date marking the start of the deadly aggression against the Gaza Strip. In a statement, the union said that 29 journalist colleagues are still in detention to this day, in addition to the 15 journalists detained before October 7, 2023. It said that the total number of journalists in prison and still in detention was 44. On Saturday, the union published the names of 70 journalists and media professionals killed in the Israeli bombardments of the Gaza Strip. Despite the humanitarian truce agreed on Friday in the occupied Palestinian territories, the Zionist entity is methodically continuing its aggression against the Palestinian people in several towns of the occupied West Bank. The Palestinian news agency Wafa said today, which reported clashes between Palestinian youth and Zionist occupation forces using war ammunition against unarmed demonstrators. Sahid Boghazi has more details.
On Tuesday evening, the Zionist occupying forces stormed the villages of Dura and Ad-Dahiriya to the south of El Khalil and Beit Awa to the west, reports Wafa, citing local sources who report attacks by Zionist soldiers on the town of Dura and the Haniniya, El Majnuna and El Majwar areas in the village of Kharsa. Large military detachments of Zionist forces also stormed Ad-Dahiriya and attacked the neighborhoods of Duma, El Mishru, and the center of the town. They also attacked a number of shops and seized recordings from several surveillance cameras and stormed the town of Beit Awa and attacked several neighborhoods. In the town of Ariha, Zionist forces attacked the Ain Sultan and Aqab Jabr camps on Tuesday evening, according to local sources, saying bulldozers were deployed by the occupying army against houses in Ain Sultan and Aqab Jabr. Violent clashes broke out on Tuesday evening in these towns, and Zionist soldiers fired live ammunition at young demonstrators, notably in Ain Sultan and Aqab Jabr, underlined Wafa, which points out that a young Palestinian was bullet injured during the invasion of the town of Beitunia, west of Ramallah. The Zionist occupying forces also stormed the Palestinian town of Jenin in the north of the West Bank on Tuesday evening, imposed a siege on the town, and arrested 2 people, reports the Palestinian agency Wafa. Large forces of the Zionist Army of Occupation, accompanied by bulldozers, stormed the town on several fronts, attacked several neighborhoods while deploying snipers on the roofs of several buildings. The director of Jenin's government hospital, Dr. Wissam Bakr, said Israeli occupation forces searched the vehicles of medical teams and employees and deployed soldiers in front of the emergency and in the hospital courtyard. Clashes also broke out between young Palestinians and the Zionist occupying forces in the Jabriyat district. Wafa also reported that bulldozers had begun to destroy infrastructure, citizens' belongings, and their vehicles in the streets of the town.
Still with the situation in Palestine, 2 children were killed Wednesday by Israeli occupation forces during their ongoing aggression against the city of Jenin and its camp. The Ministry of Health said that Adam Samer Al-Ghul, 8, and Basil Suleiman Abu Al-Wafa, 15, were killed as a result of being shot by occupation forces in the city of Jenin. The occupation forces continued their aggression against Jenin camp, where they launched a massive arrest campaign and evacuated citizens in Damj neighborhood from their homes amid violent confrontations. Security and local sources told Wafa that the occupation forces at gunpoint forced the residents of Damj neighborhood to evacuate their homes after a massive destruction of homes and streets in the neighborhood and bombed a house from a drone. The occupation forces launched a massive arrest campaign in the camp The occupation bulldozers also demolished the infrastructure, including water, electricity and sewage networks, and caused damages several vehicles in the camp. The occupation forces kidnapped one of the injured people from the ambulance while he was being transported to the hospitals. Now, Israeli occupation forces or the occupation navy boats fired a number of missiles on the coast of Khan Yunis, Ashati and Sheikh Radwan in the Gaza Strip. This coincides with the sixth and final day of the truce, which was extended 2 days ago. Media sources said that the occupation boats fired at Palestinian homes in the areas west of Khan Yunis, Ashati Camp, Sheikh Radwan, and other areas adjacent to and opposite the coast of the Strip, without any casualties being reported. As you followed in our top stories, over the past 3 days, the occupation forces violated the humanitarian truce more than once, targeting farmers while they were working on their land east of Al-Maghazi camp, killing one and injuring another. 7 citizens were also wounded by bullets from the occupation forces in the vicinity of the 2 Al-Quds hospitals in Tel El-Hawa, west of Gaza City, and the Indonesian in the town of Beit Lahia, north of the Gaza Strip. Let's recall that on the first day of the humanitarian truce, the occupation forces targeted a group of citizens while they were trying to return from the south of the Gaza Strip to the north, killing 2 and injuring others. Yes, Mariam.
The truce between the Palestinian resistance and the Israeli occupation entered its 6th day today with a new exchange of Israeli hostages against Palestinian prisoners at a time when international mediators are stepping up efforts to obtain a lasting ceasefire. In a reaction to the extension of the ceasefire, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has expressed hope.
It's a glimpse of hope and humanity in the middle of the darkness of war. And I strongly hope that this will enable us to increase even more the humanitarian aid to the people in Gaza that is suffering so much, knowing that even with that additional amount of time, it will be impossible to satisfy all the dramatic needs of the population in Gaza. I am sincerely hopeful that it will be possible to have other crossings because they will facilitate the distribution and that will also facilitate the control by the Israeli side. So I'm very hopeful that this will happen.
The 48-hour extension of the truce to Thursday at 5 a.m. GMT should allow the release of an extra 20 hostages from the resistance and 60 Palestinian prisoners, indicated Qatar, the main mediator of the negotiations. Back to you, Jamal.
Now, dozens of Israeli settlers Wednesday morning stormed Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in occupied Jerusalem under protection from Israeli occupation police, according to local sources. Witnesses said scores of settlers entered the Al-Aqsa Mosque in separate groups where they conducted provocative tours through the courtyards of the mosque, received explanations about the alleged Jewish temple, and performed Talmudic rituals near the Dome of the Rock. 160 bodies of Palestinian civilians have been found under rubble and in the streets and roads of Gaza in the last 24 hours, the Palestinian authorities said on Tuesday. According to the Palestinian authorities, civil defense teams continue to extract dozens of people from under the rubble using manual and primitive methods. Now, UNICEF spokesperson James Elder has declared that he arrived to the Gaza Strip shortly before the humanitarian truce concluded between the Palestinian resistance and the Zionist entity, and so that the situation was even worse than he had imagined. The details with Mariam Barshi.
UNICEF spokesperson James Elder underlined having seen faces affected by shock and stress in the Gaza Strip, subjected to a savage aggression during which the Zionist entity cut all supplies of electricity, water, food and fuel in the territory. Since October 7, the Israeli authorities declared war on the Gaza Strip, leading to the massive destruction of infrastructure and causing thousands of deaths, wounded and missing, most of them children and women.
It's just that today I didn't speak to a single person who hasn't lost a loved one. The boy whose mother and father and twin brother were killed in a bombing. The father, this fear over his face because his 2-year-old and his 9-year-old are getting sicker by the hour because of unclean water. My colleague, whose sister was killed 2 days ago. The little boy with burns to more than half of his body. Or the father who cried when he told me he'd lost everything. Home, business, family, gone. Or the boy who had not yet been told that his brother and father were dead. People have lost their ability to keep their children safe. They've lost access to water. They've lost the ability to cook for their families, to sanitation. They've lost the chance to have a job. They are close to losing hope, but we must not. Everyone, everywhere, must do more.
According to Palestinian and UN sources, the aggression also caused an unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe. James Elder indicated that the damage on buildings and hospitals was extremely important and a large number of people were obliged to move and to live in difficult conditions. He underlined that 1.5 million people had been displaced at a time when children should be at school and learning a job in professional schools. James Elder added that everyone, especially children, need rest. For the time being, 1 million of children are suffering from a certain form of stress and trauma, affecting their mental health. In addition, he emphasized that children in Gaza cannot heal when they are far from their homes in camps and during the cold with no access to what they need. A 4-day truce between the Palestinian resistance and the occupation went into force last Friday and has been extended by 48 hours. It will end Thursday morning.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. I'm Jamal Thamani. Now, the President of the General Assembly, by Mr. Denis Francis, has spoken at the General Assembly plenary meeting on Agenda Item 34 entitled The Situation in the Middle East and Agenda Item 35 entitled Question of Palestine, during which he hailed the temporary ceasefire that allowed for the exchange of prisoners and hostages over the weekend and access to much-needed humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza and all affected areas.
I reiterate my call for a longer-term humanitarian ceasefire so food, water, and desperately needed medical aid can reach all those in need in the Gaza Strip and all affected areas. Humanitarian aid corridors must remain open and secure, and more assistance simply must be allowed to enter Gaza and all affected areas. I strongly condemn the indiscriminate damage caused to UNRWA schools that are now housing more than 1 million internally displaced persons. It is unthinkable that in the prosecution of this war, contrary to the rules of war, schools are no longer inviolable, nor are they used exclusively for their intended purpose, that is, education. Under international law, the protection of civilians is and must remain paramount. I therefore urge member states to provide sustainable and predictable support to UNRWA as it works to rebuild and valiantly address the biggest humanitarian crisis since its establishment. And I reiterate my solemn tribute to all brave UNRWA staff and other humanitarian workers who gave their lives trying to attenuate massive human suffering in the search for lasting peace.
For his part, the Palestinian ambassador to UN, Riyad Mansour, called on the international community to turn the truce in Gaza into a permanent ceasefire.
The UN Charter starts with this line: we, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. I often repeat this line in many of my statements. Not a single Palestinian generation has been saved from the scourge of war. Every single one has witnessed and endured horrors in its flesh. An entire nation, over decades, has faced dispossession, displacement, denial of rights, destruction, and death. This truce must turn into a permanent ceasefire. The massacres of Palestinian children, women, and men cannot resume, should not resume. You should not allow it to resume. The human conscience cannot bear it. International law, including humanitarian and human rights law, prohibits it. International law, but also the norms of humanity, demand that we act to stop this war against innocent civilians and save human lives.
That was the Palestinian ambassador to UN, Riyad Mansour. Yes, Mariam.
In New York, the spokesperson for the Secretary General, Stefan Dujarric, has spoken about the situation in the northern part of Gaza and the efforts of the UN Relief and Works Agency in funneling aid and delivering fuel.
UNRWA yesterday continued to deliver fuel to Gaza's main water plant, which in turn distributed to water and sanitation facilities in the south. Supplies of potable water in the south via 2 pipelines coming from Israel has been continuing. Our colleagues in the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tell us that the humanitarian pause agreed upon by Israel and Hamas has been largely maintained on November 27th for the 4th consecutive day. This has enabled humanitarian actors, primarily the Egyptian and Palestinian Red Crescent societies, along with various UN agencies, to enhance the delivery of assistance into and across Gaza. Yesterday, dozens of UNRWA and Palestinian Red Crescent Society aid trucks reached areas north of Wadi Gaza. The assistance included medical supplies, ready-to-eat food, wheat flour, bottled water, tents, and blankets, which were delivered to 4 UNRWA shelters and 3 main warehouses for subsequent distribution. The aid also included small amounts of fuel delivered to water production facilities to work for their reactivation following the completion of repairs.
Regarding the southern part of Gaza, where over 1 million Palestinians have arrived after the barbaric aggression of the Israeli occupation, the spokesperson for the Secretary General, Stefan Dujarric, evoked the efforts of the UN Relief and Works Agency during the current pause.
Meanwhile, in southern parts of Gaza, UNRWA has continued distributing wheat flour to internally displaced people in and outside shelters. To enable addressing the immense scope of needs, aid groups have called for the immediate reopening of more crossing points, including for the return and entry of commercial goods into Gaza. Our humanitarian partners have increased efforts to educate people also about the dangers of unexploded ordnance. This includes the training of trainers, holding in-person information sessions for IDPs in shelters, sharing posters, and of course, sending text messages. These actions have become more urgent with the ongoing pause because more people are now moving through areas which may be contaminated by unexploded ordnances.
That was the spokesperson for the Secretary General, Stefan Dujarric, speaking at his noon briefing. Back to you, Jamal.
Now back to Algiers. The Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune has terminated the functions of the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development Mohamed Abdelhafid Henni after consultation with the Prime Minister Nadia El Arbaoui. The President of the Republic appointed Youssef Sharfa to the post of Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development and Mohamed El Habib Zahana to the post of Minister of Transport. This is Radio Algeria International, and now a reminder of our top stories. November 29 marks the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people when the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Partition Resolution 181 in 1947. In a message on the occasion, President Abdelmajid Tebboune has reiterated Algeria's constant commitment to supporting the legitimate struggle of the Palestinian people to recover their non-negotiable right. Algeria is hosting an international conference to bring the leaders of the Israeli occupation to justice and impose sanctions on it for its violation of international humanitarian law. And the Israeli occupation has once again violated the humanitarian truce by firing missiles on the Gaza Strip as the exchange of prisoners and hostages is continuing amidst a catastrophic humanitarian situation.